Hello, I am Bentham and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, and off we go with our latest launch. And this vehicle is going to the moon. As I said in the previous episode, the next step was to actually set foot on the moon, and so here we go. This is our lander, and I've called it the Jumping Spider because for some reason it reminded me of one, and I'm not sure completely why. Partially, I don't know. I call it the Jumping Spider, why not? And it's going to land on the moon, and then we're going to get a few different bits of science done, and also some contract stuff. So you can see the solid fuel boosters have gone, and then we've got a couple of extra ones because this engine isn't too powerful. It's the skipper engine, and it's the middle of the 2-meter size ones. And for the size of craft that we're flying, really we should probably have a mainsail engine on. But it's fine. We just use a couple of boosters to get it to keep going at a decent speed. And after being at a bit of a steeper angle than usual, we managed to get ourselves up to a decent altitude so that everything's fine, and then we can go over onto our side as usual and stretch out the orbit. So what we're going to do, there's two different contracts that we have to, and there goes that stage. There's two different contracts to do. One of them is to land on the moon and transmit science, and then the other one is to plant a flag. So of course we'll do both of those things. We'll land in a crater and do all that and get lots of money for it and science. So anyway, we're on to the sort of the main transit stage, whatever you'd call it, the booster stage to take us to the moon. And the engine on it is not that powerful, and I end up having a bit of trouble where I have to point myself up to keep the apoapsis ahead of us. Just so that we can get into orbit, but eventually we manage it, and once we're in orbit there's no rush to get anywhere anymore. We just need to start burning when we need to meet our maneuver node and things like that. So it's straight off we sort out our maneuver to the moon and make sure that that's alright, work out when we're supposed to do it, and then we just point ourselves in the direction. And it's a little bit unwieldy, this craft, having a little pod on one end and then having this huge fuel tank on the other end that we have to swing around to point in the right direction. I was just checking my contracts there to make sure I was right on what we were supposed to be doing, and then off we go. And it's a bit of a long burn because of all the time it takes for this engine to go, but in the meantime you can have a closer look at our lander, the Jumping Spider. You can see it's got big long legs, and that was sort of where I was going with that. I don't know why it's a jumping spider. I don't know what jumping spiders look like. It just seemed like the sort of spider that might jump. It's also only got 4 legs, so I don't question me on these things. It's called the jump. Like the eagle didn't look like an eagle when the moon lander that NASA did. So you know, you can just call it whatever you feel like. It's just they went for something all patriotic and stuff, and then I went for what it sort of looked like in a weird way. But anyway, here we are on the moon. Alright, well, not on the moon, in the moon's sphere of influence. I just had a look at our path there, because I've got us going so close to the moon that if we don't make this burn, we actually get slingshot right out into space and halfway up to Juna, which is interesting. So anyway, we get ourselves pointed in what I think is the right direction. Well, earlier I pointed us in what I thought was the right direction, ended up pointing like downwards and had to fix that, but it's easy enough to get ourselves into a circularized orbit, and then it's a piece of cake from there to actually get ourselves going down towards the surface. Just swing around to about 1/3 of an orbit away from our target, which is that crater that you can see there on the right. Point ourselves at the retrograde marker, which is a little bit harder because of the huge fuel tank we're having to shift around. And then we just need to slow ourselves down enough so that our path brings us crashing into the opposite side of the crater. And then all we have to do is prevent that when we're halfway along with this tiny engine that isn't very powerful. But let's not dwell on that, because that can make you panic. So anyway, here we are halfway over the crater as far as we can be, and then we start decelerating. And the thing is, at this point I was expecting this stage to be done. I was expecting all the fuel to be used up, and we're sort of still going with it. And now we're going straight down and ready to perform a proper landing, and still the stage is there. And my original intention was to get rid of it, but I find that it's gonna take, well, to use up all the fuel in it before we dumped it. But in the end I decided that we might as well just get rid of the thing now before we end up like dropping it too late so that it just lands on the ground and we have to land on top of it. But anyway, you see off it goes exploding, and you can see it flies right off to the side, and I realised that the reason for that is that we are on a big slope. So just before landing I managed to abort, and fly us over to the top of the hill that we were about to land on the side of, because I do not want to go tumbling down the side of that, because that's happened before and it's painful and scary and it costs a lot of money, and you know, money is a problem now. Though, well, I say it's a problem, it's not really, because so far we've been earning so much money that it's not been any sort of problem at all. Money's been no object really, though I am trying to be efficient with it. So anyway, you can see we've landed now on a lovely flat place rather than where we were going to land. So now it's time to do a bunch of science, and also we get our first contract completed, which gives us 100,000 arbitrary monetary units. I don't know what they're called, whether they have a name or not, Kerbo books or whatever. And then we hop out and do various EVA things, mark our, put down our flag, mark it as Northern Crater, and managed to mess up getting back in, but fix that quickly. And we've got our other contract done now by putting down the flag, which has earned us another 100,000. So once we've got a bunch of science transmitted, I decided to hop out and do some more EVA science just for the sake of it. Once all that is transmitted, it's time to go, and we just had to get a little burn going so that we can do a bit more science while in mid-air, because that gets us different stuff than on the ground and so on. Though it's not different for different biomes, so it isn't that important, but whatever. So I take a minute to remember what direction I'm supposed to go in, because I always get confused by the nav ball, because north is down and then right is west. No, east, it's east, yeah. It's very confusing in that way, but I work it out and off we go. So it turns out we were in the perfect position, which sort of makes sense because we were landing on the day side. We're in the perfect position to just burn straight home rather than doing any messing about getting into an orbit or anything. So I just do that and then off we go. And we're doing things in record time right now. Haven't done a full orbit of the moon in the entire time we've been around it. We did most of an orbit and then landed. Oh, look at that lovely cinematic thing there with the sun going behind Kerbin as we get flung towards it at great rates of acceleration. And we're back in the atmosphere already, so we really are going fast. We're only 7 minutes in here. So now it's time to re-enter, and we'll get lots of lovely flames. And also we're coming in at a very shallow angle at very high speed, so we're going to be burning for a very long time. And also it turns out that this thing doesn't have much in the way of aerodynamic parts, so it turns very slowly, so we get to see it spinning around as the flames go all over it. And if this was real, this would explode violently everywhere from all the horrible lack of aerodynamicness and heat shielding and all sorts of stuff like that, all the flames going directly into the engines and so on. Anyway, at the moment you may be thinking, well, this looks like it's going at normal speed. I thought the rest of the video had been at 4 times, and this is at 4 times speed. It was just, I was zoomed in so much on the flames that it was lagging quite a lot, to the extent where Lagsbane had to kick in quite a bit and slow things down 4 times. So you're basically watching it in normal speed there. But now I've zoomed out a little bit, it's improved, so now it's more like 2 times speed, and then once the flames are gone, it gets back up to normal. So it takes a very long time for these flames to die out. It took 4 times longer for me, so you can imagine how boring it was getting, honestly. It does look pretty cool, and then finally the flames are gone, and we start dropping quite rapidly. And there you see there was a bit of an explosion, because I decoupled the fuel tanks on either side, and they did not do what was expected of them. You can see there's bits all over the place now. 4 different bits, actually. I'm guessing it's the 2 decouplers and then the 2 fuel tanks that were on them, or something like that. So they're all over the place, and they start crashing into the ground and making lots of little explosion noises. And looking at the footage in slow motion, which I'll show you at the end, there was actually in one frame they flipped upside down entirely without moving away from the craft, which is probably why all those explosions happened. But anyway, we are landed, and after doing a little bit more science for some grasslands, which we haven't actually done yet, it's time to go back to the base. So you can see we have a ton of science, 472, so we can do lots and lots of sciencey things there, and so on. We get some money, though I don't really care about that because we're rich anyway, and you know, we're significantly richer for doing those 2 contracts while we were on the moon. I wonder if some balancing needs to be done, but like taking out reducing all of the money from it, or maybe there's a difficulty setting, either present or coming, that will make it harder to earn money. So anyway, the obvious thing to start with is to finish off this particular tier of science, because we've got so much money that we could do all that and buy something on the next tier as well. So I thought I might as well I like to complete a tier before moving on to the next one. So I'm just looking through the stuff. We've got pods and things like that, and then we've got probe components, power things, science things, and ladders, and some landing things. In the end, I decided that the best option is to go for the one that has a what do you call them? Docking nodes, because then we can do space stations and all sorts of cool stuff like that. So over to the contracts, and it looks like there's not actually there's a lot of new testing ones, but they're all awkward and like landed at the moon and on the way out of the moon. So I just go for Explore Juno, which has popped up because that makes a lot of sense. So going over to our active missions, you can see a bunch of testing things, and then Explore Ike, Explore Minmus, Explore Juno, and of course Explore Minmus is the one that we want to be focusing on right now, and we'll either do that next episode or maybe the episode after, depending on what we decide to do, whether we decide to go back to the moon or anything like that. So anyway, we'll see what happens then, and until then I shall say goodbye, thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.